Brilliant. So yeah, welcome back to the Future Food Tech monthly webinar series. I'm Oliver Katz, the conference producer. Consumer trends are always changing, but over the last 6 months, COVID-19 has turned up the dial and accelerated both those that were already known, from foods that promote health and wellness to plant-based alternatives, as well as brought new trends to the fold. The question is, which are here to stay, and which can be contributed to short-term panic, or which are long-term changes? And today, I'm really excited to bring together 3 experts in the space from UNILEVER, Motif Foodworks, and Leatherhead Food Research to share their insights into the changing landscape, spotlight the latest innovations in sustainable and nutritious ingredients, and highlight the key technology and partnerships required to bring these innovations to market. So in terms of the scheduling today, we have 3 presentations from our speakers, followed by 2 live questions posed to each of them from you, the audience. So please post your questions in the Ask a Question section, which is located at the bottom right of your screen. And I'm already seeing lots of activity there. There's been lots already posted. So thank you very much for that. You can also upvote those questions. So the more upvoted the question, the more likely that will be asked. We've also posed a couple of questions to you, the audience, just for a bit of fun and insight. So you can find these in the poll section, which is also located to the left-hand side of the chat. So after these presentations and direct questions, there'll be a group discussion, which Simon will lead. And this will also incorporate some live questions until we wrap up on the hour. So please feel free to use that comment section to encourage productive conversations, or just cheer on your speakers. And finally, if you do experience any technical issues, please comment in the chat, and one of my team will be able to assist you there. So without further ado, I'd really like to welcome our first speaker onto the virtual stage. Carla Hilhorst is responsible for R&D within the Food and Refreshment division in UNILEVER. Not that it really needs introduction, but a 20 billion euro business consisting of ice cream, tea, dressings, savory products, also including food service. She has a master's degree in food science at the University of Wageningen in the Netherlands. And after finishing her master's, she joined UNILEVER in 1993. So welcome, Carla.
All right. Hello, everyone. Very nice to still be able to connect to you this way, even though it is virtual. I would have loved to connect face-to-face, but unfortunately, we don't live in a current world where that is a possibility. So I find it really, really nice that Future Food Tech is organizing these webinars. So let me start by sharing my screen. So we have practiced a little bit when we, so this should work. Hopefully you can see my presentation now. All right. So before actually telling you a little bit about the shifts that we are seeing in the consumer space, I wanted to set a bit of context. And the context is actually the business model that UNILEVER is driving. And it's very much driving a business model that it wants to grow by doing good. And in our case, that is very much about making progress against the purpose that the company set out for themselves, which is to make sustainable living a commonplace. And that's not because, or only because we think that's the right thing to do. We also really believe that sustainability is driving a good business. And we've got 3 pillars against that. One is very much the brand pillar, so which we call brands with purpose grow. And we are actually seeing that brands that have a recognized purpose by consumers are growing faster than brands that do not. It is important that consumers recognize the purpose. So it can be something that you've got internally defined in your company. If the consumers don't recognize it, then it doesn't translate into growth. And you see a number of examples here on the right-hand side where we have actually identified brand purposes against large global brands for us. So Knorr is very much driving a purpose that it wants to drive products that are healthier for you, but also healthier for the planet. Hellmann's, a large dressings brand, well known in the Americas for sure, is really fighting food waste. And tea is actually has a purpose of inclusive connections. And you can imagine with all the different people around the world, you know, that's also a very nice purpose to have. Then the second pillar is actually companies with purpose last. So some things you cannot do at brand level, you really have to drive at company level. And then the third one is people with purpose thrive. Of course, you then also want your employees to be behind the purpose and also have understanding of their own individual purpose. If you go back to or specifically zoom into the foods area, I'm sure this will not be a surprise for people around the call, but I do think the context is really important. We are dealing with the food system.
Carla, if you wouldn't mind just putting it on full screen, I think you'll be able to, if you press the display settings, because we're seeing what the next slide is showing and also your notes. It may be it's better, so, easier for people to see the full.
Oh, wait. Full screen, let me check.
On the top, next to show taskbar, there's display settings, and that should hopefully.
Is this better?
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Great. So my apologies for that. Yeah, so again, I don't think this is a new news for people around the call, but I do think it's an important context. So we're dealing with a food system that is really challenged and actually needs transformation. Because on one hand, we have 2 billion people around the world that are obese. At the same time, we've got 800 million people around the globe that are hungry. And with this COVID crisis, it's quite likely that that number will increase. We have a climate change where the contribution of agriculture is also there. So also on the production end, we have a challenge. We have a biodiversity challenge. Yeah? If you look at the amount of food that we're eating, then the diversity of our diet is actually relatively low. And of course, that goes back to what is being produced. And that has an impact on soil quality, etc. And the reality is also that 30% of the food that we are producing, we are actually wasting across the value chain. So I think that's a reality that that is important when we start talking about consumer changes in light of COVID. And if anything, the acceleration or the need for acceleration of transformation of that food system has only increased because of COVID. Going specifically to consumers now a little bit. So what does it look like if we are in some parts of the world at least moving from coping with the crisis to winning in a post-COVID world? And I know that the reality across the globe is quite different. Some countries are already close to the new normal. Other countries are getting out of their lockdowns, and especially in a cluster like Latin America, they are still in full lockdown. But what we're seeing is obviously some headwinds have moved into tailwinds and the other way around. But it's quite interesting to look at this table from Euromonitor that is showing that the only consumer segments that are forecasted to show growth are actually fresh and packaged foods and home care. And all of the other consumer markets are expected to experience a negative effect of COVID-19. We also see in trust barometers that people now trust food companies more than ever. So it's quite an interesting place to be. And with recessionary conditions inevitably coming at us, we do actually see that consumers are focusing more on health and also on financial security. And there are a number of structural shifts that we see happening. And again, some of you will not be that surprised about, because for sure you are experiencing that yourself as well. So clearly, where and how consumers shop. Enormous increase in e-commerce, in e-everything to a certain extent, a huge shift of consumers, and absolutely the expectation that that will not go back to where it was before COVID, the moment we live in a post-COVID world. Also in the area of food service, and again, it depends a little bit on the geography, the whole takeaway market has really shifted. When people are going to their offices, they can pick up a coffee, they can have lunch. And now we see that delivery at home has increased massively. The other area is wellness redefined. So the overall focus of consumers on health in general has really increased. And on one hand, that is very specific health conditions, like absolutely immunity. And again, you will not be surprised. But we also see that is very much on a holistic level. So the awareness that if you are overweight, your immune system functions less, or if you get the virus or you fall ill, you also have a higher chance of being seriously impacted. But also things like emotional wellness, mental wellness is something that is increasing, and consumers are looking at that more. And then the third one I wanted to call out is you actually see consumers shifting from sustainability to purpose. So from inclusion of ethical credentials and environmental aspects like sustainable packaging and climate change, to a much more holistic approach where they want to see an integrated package of social, environmental, and economic components. If I translate that a little bit to my world and make it a little bit more concrete, these are the elements that we are seeing as consumer trends in the post-COVID world. So we see cocooning continuing, and we see higher in-home consumption, and we are expecting that will be with us for a while. And the out-of-home channel, what we see in countries where lockdowns are easing, is that it is really not coming back as quickly as you expect, and that definitely the takeaway element is staying at a high level. And of course, you can then zoom into that more and find your innovation opportunities within that. And that can range from giving solutions for inspiration for meals, because people are preparing their meal much more often at home. And again, you see that the skill level of consumers is very different depending on the country. So it can be a very skilled consumer in an emerging market, and it can be a less skilled consumer in a developed market. But we also see that and we call that the lipstick effect, that the need to also give yourself a treat once in a while has also really increased in the in-home environment. The second pillar is what we call the health and immunity pillar. So very much immunity-based products, either directly or holistically, but we also see that the plant-based space has really accelerated. So we see that the amount of products that we are selling in this plant-based space has really, really increased compared to the pre-COVID space. And also that's an area to innovate in much more than we've done, let's say, 3, 4, 5, 6 months ago. Clearly, I already mentioned, I don't think many people will deny that we are moving into a recessionary or a phase of recession. And that's where value will become very important. Value for the cash-strapped consumers. And that's where you have to deliver superior performance. You have to make sure that your price is right, and you have to deliver value, which can be done in an end-to-end type of model. Everything. So, the digital space is really exploding, and that can be different channels. E-commerce channel, omni-channel, direct-to-consumer channel. So if the away-from-home channel is increasing so much, can we actually drive our ice cream sales with that? What does that mean for our products, for our packaging? How do we make sure that our products stay at the right quality level whilst they actually go through a relatively longer, if you like, a delivery time compared to when they are served in a restaurant type of setting? So all kind of new challenges that this brings to the surface. And then the fifth pillar, which is maybe a little bit less directly to consumers, is really food system resilience. I did already mention that in my context setting, but first of all, it's very much supply chain resilience, which is looking differently right now. And we have to find the right balance between global sourcing and local sourcing. And neither is the solution. It's not fully global. It's definitely also not fully local. So we really have to de-average depending on the ingredient supply chain, but also in the bigger picture. We absolutely need to look at that food system transformation. And currently, we've got 2 people from UNILEVER that are seconded to the World Economic Forum and the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. And they are helping to prepare a pre-summit, which will take place by the end of the year, to prepare for a UN summit on food system change that is planned for the end of 21. So also there are loads of stuff happening. So how does that translate to technical challenges, which is the world that we are living in? So a huge amount of technical challenges in the area of plant-based, whether that is dairy alternatives for ice cream, for mayonnaise, or whether that is meat alternatives. And also an enormous amount of technological development taking place in that area. And we are working with many partners to actually bring that to a higher level. It is related to novel proteins, but definitely also to reducing off flavor, finding the right mouthfeel in our products, the right creaminess, etc. Definitely the area of bio-based packaging. As UNILEVER, we have committed to moving to fully recyclable materials by 2025. And we started very enthusiastically to on our journey to move to recyclable flexibles. And that was or is at the moment still recyclable plastic. But we are discovering more and more that having recycle-ready packaging doesn't mean yet that it is also collected. And setting up these collection systems together with others is not easy in a number of the countries that we are active in. So in a country like Indonesia, that's not easy. So you actually see the ask from the business more and more, can you find alternative materials for which there is already an existing collection system in place? So areas like a paper stream, where we can find the right quality material that has the right barrier properties, so that we can also maintain our products over shelf life. Also home compostable materials. So huge amount of technical challenges in that space. Very interesting, by the way. And then this whole area of nutrition, which is massive. And we have been on a journey of salt and sugar reduction, and with us, many of our fellow industry members have been on this journey, but there are still some technical challenges there if you want to reduce the levels further. Micronutrient fortification, even more on the agenda with COVID coming, and with the realization of many consumers that actually having a proper micronutrient status is helping your immune system to function better. But also biodiversity. Biodiversity, very important from a planet point of view, but also very important to actually drive more diverse diets. So that's an area that we really have to drive. And when you go to more diverse ingredients, how do you actually incorporate them in your product design? New technical challenges are then coming to the surface. Gut microbiome, an area that is exploding in terms of activity, and an area that is now starting to be called your second brain. Huge amount of research taking place, and will have an impact on the way we will design our products, the way our diets will be recommended, probably also moving it to a bit more personalized. And other areas like women's life stages, sleep, mental energy. So an enormous amount of technical challenges that are underlying these consumer trends. And that's actually what I wanted to cover in the 10 minutes that I had available. Oliver, back to you.
Oh, thank you so much, Carla. That was so interesting. Brilliant to hear those kind of.
I can't hear you.
Can you not hear me? Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Yes, I can. Yeah.
Okay, good. Perfect. Yeah, thank you so much. That was a really, really insightful presentation. So a couple of questions that are coming through our audience. One which you kind of highlighted in terms of the direct to consumer. So with the surge in online food, beverage shopping and direct to consumer, and an emphasis on local produce, what changes in Unilever is Unilever going to make moving forward in its supply chain? And that was submitted by Monica during the registration period.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting question, and I already alluded to it in my presentation. In the end, there are a number of factors here. So one is, of course, what does the consumer want? And you do see in a number of areas that the consumer is looking for more local, but it needs to be local that he or she is recognizing. So that's one. On the other hand, you have the supply chain resilience component. And there we keep on emphasizing that in order to build resilience in the supply chain, the answer is not always local. Because if you source only locally in a situation where you have a crop failure, you have a problem because you don't easily have an alternative. So you, depending a little bit on your crop, you have to find a balance between global sourcing and local sourcing, where your starting point really needs to be, how do I build the right resilience? And in some cases, the answer is local. In some cases, the answer is not.
Great, perfect. And how do you discover consumer insights beyond reading marketing literature? So how do you get out of the building to perform consumer discovery and kind of validation?
Yeah, also really nice question. So thank you for the question. Again, answers at different levels. First of all, I work in a large company, and the advantage is that we have a very mature and high quality CMI function. And they have all sorts of listening tools where they listen to what's trending in social media. And with that, they give us regular updates. Secondly, we have now moved that to virtual. When I have a country connect, I always organize a consumer connect upfront. So next week I have a connect with a couple of countries in Southeast Asia. And next week I will have a consumer connect with a consumer in Myanmar. 2 weeks ago, I had a consumer connect with a consumer in Hungary. For a few weeks' time, I have a consumer connect with a person in Australia. So, and we do that virtually. So that is really nice because then you can still have the dialogue. It doesn't completely replace face-to-face, but it is an excellent way of still connecting.
Brilliant. Yeah, I think that's what everyone's finding at the moment. Great. And then finally, one final question. So Oliver Camp, who I think was a former Unilever colleague of yours, he's really keen to learn more about Unilever's position on micronutrient fortification in the COVID context. So as people revert to staple foods, how can we ensure that hidden hunger doesn't arise?
Yeah, no, again, a really fair question, and answer at different levels. So maybe first at company level. So as a company, we have committed to fortify 200 billion servings of our foods products by 2022, I think. So that's a company commitment. And that's something that we're driving. And we're focusing on 5 micronutrients of concern. It's iodine, iron, zinc, vitamin A, and vitamin D. Because actually, when we look around the globe, it is those type of micronutrients where we see in most of the countries undernutrition happening, if you like. So that's for the company level. Then, of course, at a consumer level, we're now seeing that the ask for micronutrients is increasing. So we're also starting to innovate more on that specifically in our products. And then I think the third pillar is that we are also really looking at the meal advice and the meal inspiration that we are giving. Because by giving the right combination of vegetables and other ingredients, you can also make sure that you give some advice, like if you want to have high iron diet, these are the type of meals that you can consider. So you can really act here on different levels.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. They're fantastic answers to those questions. And yeah, definitely have more time to ask you some more of the group discussion at the end. So thank you so much, Carla. So now I'd like to invite the second presenter up, Michele Fite. She is the Chief Commercial Officer and leads the commercial strategy and execution for Motif Foodworks, building and leading teams in business development, marketing, sales, and product management. Hello and welcome, Michele. Over to you.
Hi, Oliver. How are you? Thank you so much. So hi, everybody. I'm going to be working now to share my screen, and so glad to be here with all of you today. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Just a second while I work to figure out. I need to, there. All right. Hopefully, Oliver, you can confirm that everybody can see my screen.
I can confirm. Yeah.
Fantastic. So thank you, everybody, for this opportunity to be with you. And I share Carla's sentiments that it's too bad that we can't be together in person, but what a great opportunity for more people, as Oliver and I were talking earlier, for more people to have access to the webinar we're having together today, and great time for us to just get together and to talk about trends in the marketplace and how companies are coming together to innovate during these unprecedented times and when consumers are changing the way they are coming into the food industry. So I'm Michele Fite, Chief Commercial Officer of Motif Foodworks. Motif Foodworks is a company that has been in existence for about 18 months now. We are a food ingredient innovation company that is bringing breakthrough technologies that is changing the way consumers are going to experience and eat plant-based foods. So I'm going to share a bit today with you about what we're doing in the space of plant-based foods and talk about consumer trends and how we're bringing innovation into plant-based foods. So first, I want to talk about the way people are choosing and consuming their food, and it's changing rapidly. And consumers are driving a sweeping shift from animal-based foods to plant-based foods. You guys are aware of these tremendous changes, but this shift is dramatic. And consumers are citing a plethora of reasons. Most importantly, they're citing health, environmental impact, and cruelty of animals is why they're changing dramatically the way they eat. And the industry is growing in plant-based foods at an unprecedented rate as plant-based eating becomes a holistic lifestyle choice for many, many more people. Globally, over 70% of the population is now trying to reduce the amount of meat or animal products that they are consuming. So this animal-free revolution is just starting. It's just getting started. You can see on this slide here the kind of growth that is happening here in the US and what is projecting to happen across the world. and everyone wants a piece of this pie. Many food companies are bringing their own formulations to the marketplace. And while there's another group of food companies that are acquiring companies with a vast amount of experience in the space, everyone's coming to the space here. And what's happening in the time of this COVID crisis? What we're seeing is that plant-based foods are accelerating. And consumers are accelerating their march toward animal-free products. Plant-based diets are viewed as less risk, healthier, and even free of disease. That's why we're seeing this unprecedented growth in plant-based products, despite what's going on with the COVID environment that we're in. And that's all because more and more consumers are worrying about the nutritional content in their diets. That's why we're seeing this tremendous uptick in plant-based foods. But plant-based foods are still not living up to their mainstream expectations, because there's a little secret going on here. And that's that plant-based foods, they don't taste as good as animal-based products. And consumers will tell you that no matter how many times you talk to them, ask them in research, do it in qualitative work, there are still changes that the market, and Carla touched a bit on this, about what we have to do as an industry for the market to overcome before plant-based foods can completely live up to what is expected out of the mainstream industry. And this lack of not tasting as good as the product shows up in the data. You can see in household penetration, plant-based food still has a way to go. And it's in penetrating as high as its counterparts in animal-based products. And it shows up even in repeat purchases. Plant-based products on a repeat basis just are almost half of what their animal counterparts are. Sorry. So we have opportunity here. Problem or opportunity? We see at Motif Foodworks that taste, texture, smell, and the appearance, well, these are really the golden carrot, the big opportunity that's in front of our industry to innovate and to create change. We believe at Motif that traditional methods, that the traditional way that most companies approach how they solve for these problems and what consumers are asking for, because what they're asking for is a better plant-based food, that the traditional methods of approaching this are really reaching their limit. And that food manufacturers need new innovative solutions. The way we do this at Motif Foodworks and how we're working to change this is first by looking tightly and intimately with consumers. So here you can see, just through deep consumer insight, that the consumer is creating a roadmap for us to find new opportunities to create better plant-tasting foods. So here we're giving you an example in a meat alternative burger. Using insightful sensory work, it shows us the opportunities for our innovation tools. It also shows us what matters the most to consumers. And what matters the most here in a plant-based burger is texture. And they're telling us we need to solve for that texture. So how are we going to innovate and find new alternatives? We found at Motif that we need to apply a different and new approach. The old standard way that many companies approach is what we call modify and mask. And what they try to do is to cover up what's unappealing in plants. And that's a way that's worked well. But with this revolution that is changing, consumers are asking for more. They're asking for the product to taste delicious and craveable, so they want to eat it every day. And we make those penetration numbers higher and those repeat numbers higher, and we create big businesses that consumers are going to love the food we deliver. Our approach, we want to change and shift and create a fundamental understanding in the way consumers eat and in the science. And so what we do is create a scientific approach that combines things like oral processing physics, and material science, coupling that with synthetic biology to create breakthrough technologies. And as a result, what happens is we can create new products that changes the way we formulate plant-based foods. So instead of the traditional texturants and gels and emulsifiers and combining traditional fats and oils to try to make the plant proteins that you work with taste better, we are creating new technologies that's going to change that formulation. And so new proteins, new fat structures, new texturants, and new fibers that'll work with the plant proteins to create foods that consumers are going to crave. So our approach is deep consumer insight that leads the way to understanding what the consumer values in plant-based foods, a new approach that combines science differently to uncover new breakthrough technologies that changes the formulation in a way that's new and different, so the food is craveable. Our goal is to make that penetration higher of plant-based foods, more consumers who want better tasting plant-based foods. So with that, Ollie, I'm going to turn it back over to you. I'll stop sharing and we can take some questions. Did I do the stop sharing?
Yes, you did. Yeah. Perfect. Great. Thank you. Another fantastic presentation with some really great insights. And to highlight as well, the number one trend that people are saying that's going to stay in our poll is plant-based, followed by sustainable sourcing is third. So that's great. Really interesting to hear. And I guess you said you focused a lot on the consumer trend side of things in terms of, listening to the consumer. So I think it's best maybe to even follow with the question that I asked Carla. And, how do you discover consumer insights beyond reading marketing literature? How do you get out the building to perform and discover these trends?
So that's a great question, Ollie. So it's very important that we understand what we call the sensory experience, but that organoleptic experience for consumers. Because again, the goal is they want a product that they can eat every day and that they can use, have versatility in how they use. So we need to first understand how they use it and then what is really important in their sensory experience. And so it's a tremendous amount of use and sensory understanding. And in pre-COVID days, it was easy to be out in the world with the consumer. But even today, while we're locked in our homes, we have found that we can do a tremendous amount of virtual work with our plant-based consumers to understand their sensory needs and what they place primary value on, which is still allowing us to move ahead in our innovation work, in our technical work, and in our development work.
Perfect, thanks. And I guess secondly, which is quite an upvoted question, is how does cell-based and plant-based proteins fit in this post-COVID world?
That's another great question. What we have found is that they actually cell-based, plant-based, that the alternative, I'll just call it the alternatives, the animal alternatives are finding much more acceptance in this COVID world. There is an underlying concern about safety, more attention to disease, more attention to nutritional content and health. And there is a bit of fear as well about what is happening in our food value chain. And it's just building on the trends that Carla articulated, that I've articulated here, that are driving the values of consumers that are moving them into animal alternatives. And so that is why consumers are looking at plant and believing that plant-based foods, animal alternatives have viability because they believe that they are inherently safer, that they're healthier. And our job in cell-based products, meat alternatives and dairy alternatives is to ensure that we deliver that safety, that nutritional value, that health, along with all the satisfactory taste and texture experiences.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for that. And yeah, and more opportunity to discuss those key topics in a moment. So I'd like to now introduce our third presenter. So Simon Norman. Simon is the head of product development, the director of chemistry, director of chemical services at Leatherhead Food Research. He's an organic chemist by training, and Simon joined the science group in 2013 as a product development chemist. And he's now got a cross-group role coordinating product development challenges for the food and beverage industry. Welcome, Simon.
Hello. Hi, how are you doing? You can hear me, right? Yeah?
Yep. Hear you loud.
Okay, great. Okay, well, hello to everybody else as well. Thank you very much for sticking around to hear me speak as well. And then we'll invite the other two back at the end of this to talk more openly and ask some awkward questions to them. I'm just going to build my screen up. And whilst I do that, apologies if this all fails. I had a bit of a technical situation earlier as we were rehearsing and setting up. So hopefully you are now getting access to share my screen, and I'm going to start talking anyway. So the first, a very quick note about who we are at Leatherhead. Leatherhead is a world-leading food and beverage consultancy, and what we do is cover regulatory, safety, consumer insights. We have a membership team, and then as part of a more global corporate group, have product development activities as well. So we represent, or we hope we do, a full service end-to-end product development capabilities, and we help our clients identify opportunities for innovation and implement those innovations in the lab. And so as a result, we have the privilege of seeing innovations come down the pipeline, and also getting involved in helping clients identify those dominant trends, which is what we're here to speak about today. So I guess the original version of this presentation we were going to use at the conference that was going to be in San Francisco in March. So in order to support that, we ran a consumer insights survey using our UK portal and around late January, early February. The idea of that was to build a forecast of key trends for 2020. Of course, that kind of went off the table a little bit with the current COVID situation, but we'll touch on that in a second as well. The aim of our research was really around functional ingredients and ingredient trends. And the top line from our research is that consumers want to see more inclusion of functional ingredients in day-to-day products. In general terms, that means bringing to market products that include ingredients targeted towards improving gut health, boosting the immune system, and building energy and alertness throughout the day. And these desired benefits are conserved across all demographics, though certainly there are some interesting nuances in the demographics splits. So just to pick up on two that might be interesting, a desire for ingredients which help promote gut health commands an even higher demand within the over 65 demographic. And other potential product benefits are desired by the 16 to 35 age group, such as ingredients which will aid performance or particularly sports recovery. Functional ingredients to benefit skin or hair quality is doubly important for women than for men. And finally, we should note throughout all of our research, the ongoing and now somewhat normal trend towards natural, clean label, low sugar, low salt, low fat products. For many of our consumers, when we speak to them, this is a new baseline. And any product development must build these attributes in, but this is not a unique selling point anymore. So then maybe if we look at what's happened in the last few months, interestingly, our most recent consumer trends work suggests there maybe isn't too many differences in what consumers are looking for from their food. Carla and Michele have talked a little about how that food might be delivered, but I think those dominant trends around functional ingredients are going to be continue over the course of the next few years regardless. The majority of respondents suggest that they have not changed their feelings on sustainability, they've not changed their feelings on ethics of food in light of the pandemic. Similarly, we don't see any concerns over food hygiene in the supermarket or even out in the food service industries. Of course, important to note, our respondents are UK-based, where sometimes the food supply chain can feel fairly remote and not really a part of our day-to-day experience. The biggest impact our respondents noted are on the availability of certain ingredients, and obviously the decision to go to the supermarket less often, buying more at one time. So I'd like then to talk a little about how we can develop products that meet those dominant trends that I just talked about. We know that for many of our clients, communicating with consumers is all about the benefits they can deliver as product developers. So if we look at the high priority benefits that consumers are demanding in those dominant trends, we need to ask where we can expect to find those new ingredients, those new technologies. I think if I was to pinpoint one single technology which seems to be the top of our mind for our own internal developments, for our clients' developments, it's potentially the looking at fermentation technologies to solve these core consumer challenges. Now, if you believe the hype, fermentation could be the answer to all of your problems as a technology developer. And obviously fermentation covers a lot of different actual technologies. But I think it's worth thinking about these potential advantages in light of some of those consumer trends. So when we think about health claims, there's an important tie between the health claims of fermented products and that consumer trend for gut health claims. So amongst other halo benefits of fermentation, consumers appear willing to believe that fermented products bring with them these health benefits in a systemic manner. So building off the traditional credibility and consumer buzz around products like kombucha, kimchi, and sauerkraut seems to be a winning proposition as people think about new product development. I think other parts of the Future Food Tech webinar series will cover alternative proteins in a lot more detail. And obviously we just heard Michele talk about it as well. And underpinning quite a lot of those technologies is obviously fermentation. So I won't say too much more about that. I'm sure there are more qualified people out there who can tell you in much more detail how they're using fermentation technologies to develop new functional proteins. One that's maybe closer to my heart and things that I've been working on very recently is fermentation as a preservation technology. Now, again, this is something that's obviously millennia old. The reason that we ferment products is to let them last longer. But what we're seeing now is an intersection between fermentation as a functional ingredient technology and the desire for natural and clean label products. So what we're seeing is asking questions like, is there an extract of a fermented product that contains those really powerful bacterial killing, fungal killing ingredient potential? And then how do we use that in our new product development? Now, this isn't necessarily a completely new trend. I know a lot of ingredient companies have been working on this for years, and there are obviously certainly challenges as well, some of which is down to the cost basis, but also sometimes to do with flavor profiles, with discoloration of products. So we're also looking to see more technology coming out of the masking ingredients in order to help this come through. And finally, again, I think Michele was just talking about this in terms of texture modification. We can rely on microbial enzymes or whatever else we want to modify proteins, maybe create exopolysaccharides, which provide that rheological stability, body, depth, flavor to a mouthfeel. And crucially, again, tying that back to keeping a seemingly clean label. So I think there are lots of other ways you can approach the challenges of meeting these consumer dominant trends, but certainly anyone who's not thinking at least about fermentation is potentially missing a trick. The second thing I sort of wanted to talk about, because sorry, I'm scrolling too far there, because it's a topic close to my heart, is how companies can really move faster as R&D teams. We see these trends popping up constantly, and obviously the COVID situation is only highlighting how slow it can feel as a product developer to react to new things that are happening that change the paradigm that we all exist in. So big brand products have a very long heritage and an emotional connection with their customers. And these are built on certain product attributes which need to be maintained. Yet, big brands must still adapt and respond to market trends to survive. And you heard a little about Carla talking about how UNILEVER are going about that with some of their products. There is a trade-off as R&D teams reformulate to use natural ingredients. Will they maintain the same shelf life? Will there be a texture modification? Will the flavor be perceived by the consumer in the same way? And so sometimes we find this can lead to a paralysis, very long R&D cycles as that single perfect solution is sought. So at Leatherhead, we have a pragmatic solution, or in fact, we have two pragmatic solutions. The first is something we've noted when talking with client customers time and time again, that actually those must-have attributes are not perhaps as strict as some product management teams will believe. So we've successfully created white space for innovation with our clients by challenging the perceived brand core identity and backing that up with our consumer sensory data, consumer preference maps. If you as a consumer insights team can more precisely quantify and describe the boundaries, your red lines for reformulation, your product development teams will have a much higher chance of success, and they'll be able to move a lot more quickly. The second technique which underpins our approach to R&D acceleration is the development of what we call sensory predictive models. The aim of this is to help R&D teams iterate more quickly in the laboratories, minimizing time lost waiting for sensory results and the out-of-pocket expenses associated with consumer testing. Our approach is to identify, design, and then transfer to our clients specific analytic tests which become correlated and calibrated through data science techniques to quantitative sensory insights. Now, in doing this, product developers are able to get really rapid feedback that they're on the right track with the development, whether it's on a mouthfeel, a texture, a product stability basis. And ultimately, this should help widen the funnel for new functional ingredients that people are looking to bring to the table. So in conclusion, wrapping up my portion of the discussion here, we believe the impacts of COVID-19 are still going to be very unpredictable. We don't see a big impact in the immediate short term, as it pertains particularly with those dominant consumer trends and how people perceive food products. We do believe that the trend for more functional ingredients and potentially direct on-package claims will continue regardless. Consumers are more aware than ever on the link between diet and different aspects of their personal health. And in order to make that happen, R&D teams need to be structured in a manner which allows for agile and efficient testing of new ingredient technologies. That might be either through partnering with startups, engaging with the big ingredient suppliers out there, or potentially developing new methods in-house. That felt like I rambled for a while there, so hopefully that was clear to everybody. I'm going to stop sharing the screen, I think. And Ollie, are we back? Is everything fine?
Yeah, you did not ramble. That was all very interesting, Simon, so thank you very much. A couple of quick questions before we get to a group discussion. So firstly, are all the ingredients natural? And how do you deal with the perception that the products are not all natural?
Yeah, we struggle with this on a almost daily basis when we're looking at natural product technologies. And a lot of this goes back to differences in different cultures on what is perceived as natural. Something which is natural for someone in the UK here may not be perceived as such by someone, let's say, in Brazil. And again, some of that also goes back to regulation and labeling. So I think it's really critical that when you start out down this path, that you do that groundwork to understand, can I categorize the world into different areas where different things will be allowed and different things will be perceived in different ways.
And when developing new methods to produce foods, you were talking a lot about, fermentation, microbes. At what stage of the product development do companies start addressing kind of regulatory requirements around food safety?
I guess there's lots of different aspects of regulatory that need to be brought in at different times. Question number one is always going to be, functionally, can I sell this? Can I take this to the place where I want to and put it on the market? Now, some of that, and you particularly mentioned food safety as well, some of that comes down to managing your supply chain, choosing whether or not you can hit your shelf life in the cold chain, in the freezer aisle, or potentially ambient. But regulatory is, it differs around the world. And I know a lot of our clients will, unsurprisingly, pick a test market just to find out whether people want something or not before really then going ahead with rolling out around the world. But a smart product developer is one that thinks about, a harmonized approach. What is the minimum amount of change I will need to do next year to support this product I'm developing right now?
Brilliant. That's really helpful. Thank you. And then finally, quickly, or I don't know if this is a quick answer, but firstly, how do we fix an unhealthy gut microbiome? And really, what are the ingredients that are kind of most sought after to deliver kind of positive effects in this area?
Yeah, I don't think there is a short answer. Yeah. Sorry. I guess I would almost challenge the question, because I'm not sure right now that the health experts really have an idea of what healthy gut microbiome actually is. I think we all have differing opinions, and really there is a lot of fundamental research needs to go on right at the start of that. We see a lot of there's a lot of good studies coming out that suggest links between certain types of ingredients and feeding the healthy bacteria and not being preferential food for the unhealthy bacteria. But where we always start with a client is really challenging that understanding on healthy bacteria side of things.
Great, thank you. Perfect. Well, we're coming up to the hour, but if it's okay with the speakers, we'll kind of push it on to about 10 past to make sure that you have enough time for a good little debate. So I'll bring in the other speakers, and I'll leave you, Simon, to continue the conversation.
Okay, great. So just going to give Carla and Michele a second to join back. I'm not sure if they can hear me or if we can hear them.
I can hear you.
I can hear you too.
Not seeing anything on my screen. Here we are. Carla and Michele, are you there?
We're here.
Yes,
I'm here.
Can you hear him?
Hello,
Simon?
Hello, Carla, Michele, you got me?
We got you.
All right, awesome. I'll start with what might be an awkward question. It kind of builds on one that Ollie asked me. Both of you talked about using plant-based ingredients to develop new products, either replacing dairy in ice cream or replacing meat proteins. Do you think that there's a kickback coming from consumers about labeling and the appearance of plant-based foods as not clean label as such?
So actually, Carla, if you don't mind, I'll jump in on that, because we've actually done a tremendous amount of research in this area. Excuse me. And what we're finding is that the overriding values for the dominance of the consumers that are in this space are their values of wanting health, environmental benefits, and animal welfare are the primary aspects of the things that they're looking for on labels. And so they're driven by those criteria first. And clean label, our research is showing that things like clean label will fall down much lower in their criteria and their request. And so they're willing to accept science and technology to gain those benefits of animal free, as long as they deliver on improved health, which is the primary promise of plant-based foods and animal-based foods, environmental benefits. So we need to deliver on the improved benefits of the planet, and improved animal welfare.
Yeah, maybe I can build on that, because I think you are right, Michele. As long as a label that will look a little bit more processed is delivering a benefit for consumers, they will accept it. The moment an alternative offering comes on the market, which is as good, but with a cleaner label, I think that product will have a differentiation, an advantage. So that's how you should. So the answer is it's relevant. However, if there's a huge benefit, consumers are willing to sacrifice.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Yes, and I guess that almost brings me on to a question I had, Carla, right at the beginning of your discussion. You talked about looking for brands with purpose and defining a purpose within a brand. And I think the purposes you came to with the three that you mentioned are really great, strong ones. But can you tell us a little bit more about the actual process you went through internally to define and articulate your mission statements in order to meet sustainability goals, etc.?
Yeah, it is a huge journey that you go through with a brand. And I think, to be fair, we've also had examples where we thought that we had defined the purpose, and then, the consumer didn't recognize it, or we were not sharp enough. So it also really needs to be something that fits the brand. And of course, many brands have a large history. So, it needs to be a fit. Also a purpose like better for people and better for planet, linked to an ice cream brand, will be much less credible. So then maybe one of our ice cream brands has a much more of a social mission of bringing people into the workplace. And you can do that with your, in your system, selling system chain, if you like, by deploying people that struggle to get into the social workplace. So, you can really look at this end to end, but it is a bit of a journey, and it's also something that is being sharpened over time. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess a similar question to you, Michele. You maybe as a newer brand to the market, have the luxury of defining that mission statement in a slightly more free way.
That's very fair. So we are working very hard, since we are in the animal-free space, to ensure that the products that we deliver are right in the wheelhouse that Carla articulated, of helping our customers, like a Unilever or other food manufacturers, ensure that they can deliver on their sustainability goals. So we want to also ensure that our products deliver on that promise of being animal-free, which allows that plant-based product formulation to improve on the sustainability and environmental promise that the consumer is looking for in that product.
Maybe, Oliver, I can just build a little bit on what Michele was saying and what I was saying previously. I think what's really important, if a brand has defined a certain purpose, is that what we call the brand say and the brand do are actually in line with each other.
Yes.
Because else it becomes an empty promise. And therefore, the moment you have a purpose identified, you actually need to go to the product truth and say, so, if we want to deliver on the purpose, what is actually the elements in the products that we want to deliver on? And then you start driving that and tracking that, and in our case, you start translating that into technical challenges that R&D then can deliver on. But having that brand say and brand do in line with each other is really important, else consumers simply don't believe you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then maybe final topic or final question I wanted to ask about R&D, let's say strategies or R&D processes, close to my heart. So how are you guys dealing with either social distancing in the labs, maybe lack of ability to get out into the field and speak to consumers in the way you'd expect to? What does R&D look like in COVID world?
Mm-hmm. So for us as a startup, it's actually it's been challenging, but actually exciting to see the creativity and the kind of innovation and how we're going to get our work done. So we are based in Boston, Massachusetts, and everything was shut down. So what we got creative and actually worked on building labs and homes so people could get a modicum of work done. And then we found ways to find labs, partnered labs in other locations that weren't shut down or had some small aspect open. So we just got highly creative through our food network, our academic network, our partnership, and then we actually went into other countries as well and found ways to quickly create a massive, what we call the scientific network, that helped us keep ourselves up and running and our technology and innovation moving forward. So we're pre-market right now. So ours is all about keeping the development process moving. I actually will say that our consumer insight work and our connection to the marketplace has been easier than I thought it would be, because consumers have been fast adapting in the ability, because technology is so good these days. We have been able to stay highly connected through this technical capability. Our biggest adoption was on the side of the technical, but it was just all about getting our network up and going. And so being down wasn't as long as we thought it was. And I was just highly excited about how creative and innovative we got in order to keep us up and running.
Yeah, it's nice to hear, because I recognize a lot. I found it impressive to see how it was, almost unleashing creativity with people. So the way we approached it is, with our R&D labs, we went to zero-based, and then we started building it up a little bit based on what we said is required for business continuity. So you can imagine in a company like UNILEVER, where you have a 20 billion turnover, we are dealing with tens of thousands of ingredients. The supply chain challenge was quite large. And R&D plays a key role the moment you want to move to alternative suppliers, or you're actually being forced to move to alternative materials, to test those in your labs and in some cases in your pilot plants. So we had to keep our labs up and running, but we did that at the minimum level. That also enabled us to understand what works and what can we do in a safe way. And we are currently ramping it up in those geographies where the lockdown is easing. Yeah, so again, that depends a little bit on where the different geographies are. But we saw exactly the same as what Michele was describing: virtual factory trials, people finding very creative ways of tasting products, of creating, shooting videos in their house, of connecting together. So actually, it was beautiful to see how creative people were. Right. So I was very impressed. Very nice.
I agree.
Excellent. What a fantastically positive note to end on after sort of a really great discussion. Those were, I think, the main topics. I'm sure there are tons of questions that we could delve into, but we are sort of overrunning our time, I guess.
Exactly. Yeah, very positive end to a fantastic webinar again. So thank you all so much for taking the time to kind of deliver those presentations and talk. So yeah, thank you very much as well to the audience as well, signing on to the Future Food Tech webinar series and your interest in this important subject and all of those questions as well. There were so many great ones that were asked, and really apologize for not getting through all of those, but you will be able to view a recording of this discussion online in around this week, and you'll receive a link to re-watch this or share with your colleagues shortly. Any feedback, please don't hesitate to reach out. We always strive for excellence and have thick skin. We also have just announced our virtual summit, and it's focusing on building resilience through technology and partnership, and really focusing on the learnings from the last 6 months and really where we need to focus our efforts to build a more resilient food system. So we already have some fantastic speakers lined up, including senior leaders from UNILEVER, Mars, Compass Group, BlackRock, So to find out more about this and to register, please head over to futurefoodtech.com. And you can also find out more about our upcoming webinars as well. So the next one is based around health and wellness. So please subscribe to that as well. But once again, thank you so much, Simon, Carla, and Michele for being part of this, and to the audience, and looking forward to hopefully seeing you in the skin sometime soon.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.